Okay, so I've watched all the episodes now, and let me just say this up front. Andor is the best thing to happen to Star Wars since The Empire Strikes Back. It is peak Star Wars. I finished the show and I was like,
now that's how you supposed to drive. From now on, that's how you drive.
it is a masterclass in storytelling, if you forget those first 3 episodes. The writing, the acting, all top notch. But it's the setups and the payoffs that make this show. They drop so many hints about things to come, and some of them are so subtle you won't catch them the first time around. The 5th episode is a perfect example of great setups for impressive payoffs. For instance, if you saw Rogue One, then you may remember that Saw Gerrera is incredibly paranoid about Imperial spies, and he goes to extremes to root them out. In episode 5, we get to see the beginnings of that. Wilman struggles to teach Saw's guide Pluty the different variations for the Rhydonium machine. No matter how hard he tries, Pluty can't memorize all the variations. Later on, he tries to convince Saw that Will should be the one to do the job, but Saw wants to kill Will. Pluty admits that he's not as good as Will. He might be able to manage 1 or 2 variations, but not 8. So Saw tells Pluty the location of the mission and decides to keep Will alive, for the moment. Now, Will watches this whole thing go down, and it's obvious he knows something's up, but I'm pretty sure he didn't expect what happens. Right before the mission, Saw confronts Will and asks if Pluty knows all the configurations. Will stammers about it, so Saw pulls a gun on him, and just when you think he's about to kill Will, Saw turns and shoots Pluty. Turns out the dude was a spy and told the Imperials about the mission, and they're already headed to that location. The wrong location. The whole thing goes down so fast that for a moment I thought Saw was actually going to kill Will. I mean, it is that kind of show. The best part though is that Saw Gerrera admits he's stone cold fucknuts. He gets Will to unlock the Rhino, talking about how he got addicted to it while Will tries to break in. It's impressive Will can focus with Saw yapping, and because of how unhinged Saw is, I thought this was just him messing with Will, or that he might actually try to kill the boy if he screwed it up. At any rate, Will cracks open a container and Saw inhales the Rhino. This would be like someone huffing a freshly opened can of napalm. And then he says this.
You think I'm crazy? Yes, I am. Revolution is not for the same.
And gets Will to inhale the Rhino too. All this just to give Saw some background, but also to make his actions in Rogue One make more sense. Now, it is also a bit of a retcon, because Andor makes it seem like Saw's lung problems are from the Rhino, but previously it was supposed to be from insecticide. The show also implies that his volatile personality is in part because he's addicted to the Rhino, not just his hot-headed extremist nature we saw in Clone Wars. We also get that bit about him being a prisoner forced to mine Rhydonium, and that is a major change because it sounds like this would have happened before the events in Clone Wars. It doesn't break anything, but it also doesn't fit neatly into his established background. Anyway, back on Coruscant, Cassian leaves for Gorman, where he'll pose as a fashion designer so he can make contact with the Gorman front. Meanwhile, Luthen visits Bix, and honestly, the moment he walked into the room, I was sure he was there to kill her. He doesn't, but the way he moves from room to room, the distance he keeps from her, it really comes across like it's a hit. But it turns out that's not why he's there. He's really there to check on her, and like any good spy, he has a cover story. He wants to send her on a mission, but when he sees her, he realizes she's not ready. He also finds her drugs. Bix says she's fine, but Luthen doesn't buy it, and he warns her about the drugs, that eventually they'll stop working and the nightmares will come back, hinting that he's already tried this. The crazy part is that even after watching this 3 times, I'm still not sure about Luthen's intentions. I know I mentioned the mission, but Bix brings up the mission. Luthen just goes along with it. There could easily be no mission, and it doesn't do anything to actually help Bix. So why is he there? One answer could be that he's trying to get a grip on things because the rebellion is now so spread out, he's losing track of it. He admits this to Clea after she tells him that Davos Skolden might find the listening device they planted in his art collection. Clea hears Skolden complain to one of his aides that one of the pieces is a forgery, so now he wants to check all the pieces to confirm they're legit. If he does, he'll find the listening device. Luthen and Clea argue over this, and Luthen admits that the scale of the rebellion has gotten beyond him. It's a great scene because we see how close these two are. Clea goes at him like nobody else does, and he actually listens to her. And it sets up something that happens with them episodes later. It also sets up just how Luthen gets so much information, and that makes his code phrase, "I have friends everywhere," take on a different meaning. Maybe it's not just a code phrase or a reference to the rebellion. Maybe it's that he's spying on everyone, including his allies, which also has a major payoff down the line. But before we can get to that, we've got to deal with the Gorman situation. Hell hath no fury like a wannabe detective played. Our Imperial ne'er-do-well Cyril continues to be a blind puppet. He tells his mother that he's coming back to Coruscant, but gets interrupted by ISB agents who claim his office is bugged, which is true. The problem is that Cyril thinks the ISB already knows this, so he doesn't understand why they're searching his office. He argues with them and then gets carted off for interrogation. That's one way of reading it. Another way is that it's a performance he's putting on for the Gorman front, knowing that it'll get back to their leaders. I'm not sure which one is true, because when Cyril returns to his office, it seems like ISB actually interrogated him. He looks genuinely pissed off. And remember, the Empire is cagey with this information, so these agents probably don't know about the Empire's plan, and they definitely don't know that Daedra is using Cyril. That lack of communication and internal distrust would make it very easy for someone to draw the wrong conclusion if, for example, a person loyal to the Empire learned too much by getting access to information they shouldn't have. Anyway, the Gorman front finds out about Cyril's past and assumes he's legitimately on their side. When they meet, Cyril tells him about the bugged office, and Rylance asks him to find out what's in the convoys going to the Imperial building. They also throw out a little tidbit of information. They think the ISB is running a shadow government under the Emperor's nose. They don't realize Palpatine is ordering all this. At first, I thought it was weird because this takes place just a few years before the first Star Wars movie. So by this time, Darth Vader has made a name for himself as the Emperor's right-hand man. How could anyone not know that the Emperor allowed organizations like the ISB to act, given what they're doing at this time? But then I remembered the bit about the Empire's propaganda, and they could easily spin Vader's actions as something else. People might think that's impossible, but in the real world, this happens with many authoritarian dear leaders. They're in control, they're the guy in charge, but their supporters, followers, and the general public will assume that when bad things happen, these charismatic leaders couldn't possibly have anything to do with that. No, it must be some other people, deep within the state, operating from the shadows. It's totally not the guy who ordered soldiers to murk Bible study kids because the galactic police monks randomly decided to attack him for no reason. No, that guy's totally on the level. Actually, you know what? Now that I said it out loud, I take it back. It is weird that anyone thinks the Emperor is not in on this shit. Anyway, after that, Cyril steals the data and gives it to the spider seller in the square, and then goes home to Daedra, where they have the world's most awkward fake relationship. Cyril starts to realize there's something off about their little game. Daedra tells him that she had him followed to make sure the Gorman front didn't follow him, and he's mad about it, but Daedra shuts him down. Like I said before, Cyril is smart enough to know when something's not right, so he's starting to suspect something extra is happening with Daedra. Why would she have him followed? And then, to hammer home the point, Cyril gets thoroughly roasted by his mother. He gives her the spider that the guy gave him, and she decides to name it after Cyril and goes on to describe him. And I can't do it justice. I'm just gonna play the clip.
The silence. The brooding. The disregard for common sense. Be almost like having you here.
Damn. Your own mama. Damn. She has a point, though. Cyril is simultaneously very perceptive and very gullible. That's the kind of situation where if he were to discover the truth about Gorman, the ISB, and Daedra, it might be a very painful revelation. But first, he's got to get past all the awkward moments. Cyril tells Daedra's boss about the Gorman situation and gets the ISB to keep everything on schedule so the Gorman front can still attack the convoy, likely with the help of Axis. That's a job well done. He gets congratulated and then makes it weird.
If I say this is the greatest day of my life, does it spoil everything?
It's like someone took Data from Star Trek, Steve Urkel, and It's Pat, shook them together, and just threw them on the screen. It's so painfully awkward, and I enjoyed every minute of it. But then we get to my favorite scenes, which is Cassian and the Gorman front. Cassian pretends to be a fashion designer named Varian Sky. I'm using that name. That's a fucking good name. I'm finding a way to use that name. Varian Sky. It's perfect. Anyway, in the last review, I mentioned how cautious Cassian had become, and we get to see how that works in the field. He manipulates the bellhop who takes him to his room, getting the guy to give him details about the situation without knowing that Cassian is with the rebellion. Cassian's room overlooks the Tarkin massacre memorial, and it turns out that the bellhop was there at the event. His father died saving him. Again, this is another one of those setups for later on. Cassian then meets with Enza, Ryland's daughter, and it goes ever so badly for her. The first time I didn't catch her mistake, but in the second watching, I caught it immediately. She has no reason to be there. She admits she's watching Cassian's hotel and implies she's got a problem with designers no longer coming to Gorman, meaning she's got a problem with the Empire. The issue is that she doesn't know anything about Cassian. Like he says, he could be part of the rebellion or an Imperial spy. And by showing up like this and carelessly speaking, Enza just let him know that she's either a part of the Gorman front or sympathetic to it. She put the entire resistance at risk, so Cassian checks her and then casually slips back into character, but before he leaves, drops the act again to tell her to call off the people following him because they're too obvious. First of all, I gotta give Diego Luna credit, because this was flawless. Second, the scene highlights the core problem with the Gorman front. They have a good plan, but they lack the expertise to do it. When Cassian meets with Rylands, they meet in the open at Rylands' business. Apparently, the Gorman fashion industry is so cutthroat that people bug each other to steal secrets, so Rylands constantly has his place checked. However, his eagerness to move worries Cassian. Rylands tells him about the Imperials building an armory, and then mentions Cyril as an insider, and Cassian is immediately skeptical, but Rylands brushes it off, as if he never even considered the possibility that Cyril could be a spy, which he is. Add to that the plan. The Gorman front checks the data Cyril gave them and realizes that the convoys are shipping weapons. They want to steal the weapons, which makes sense, and then reveal the weapons to the public, which does not. It never crosses their minds that the Empire could easily spin the revelation into something else, which has Cassian more worried. Still, he does go along with checking out their plan, and he's fine with how they plan to steal the weapons, but not with them revealing what they've done to the public afterwards, let alone remaining on Gorman after they do it, which is also part of their plan. Rylands takes that to mean that Cassian isn't much of a rebel, which is kind of true. Like I mentioned in a previous review, the rebellion is getting to Cassian. He's on the verge of tapping out, just as everything is starting to ratchet up. This is all set up for what's about to happen in the next 4 episodes, and it's brilliantly done. I also think the episode did a great job in showing the long-term effects of rebellion on the people fighting it. They're all losing bits of themselves, only seeing their part in the broader war, and are sowing the seeds for division within the rebellion. The only thing really pulling them together is their hatred of the Empire. Outside of that, they've all got different motives, goals, and tactics, many of which conflict with or completely undermine everyone else's. And while that's going down, the Empire is playing the same game, where no one has all the information, they're undermining their own efforts to stop the rebellion, and they're constantly manipulating their own team, which is totally not going to bite all of them in the ass eventually. Like I said, it's some excellent setup for some incredible payoffs. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.